Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for coming, everyone, here. My name is Edward P. Joseph of Johns Hopkins SAIS Foreign Policy Institute. I want to welcome everyone here today. And I will tell you, it's my honor. I'm going to make two introductions. First, to our honored guest, the Prime Minister of North Macedonia, Dimitar Kovacevski. I will be introducing him, and I also want to briefly introduce the country he leads, North Macedonia, where I had the privilege to work for 2 years in the early 2000s. And so doing so will complement the first and will underscore the challenge and the accomplishments that Prime Minister Kovacevski is making and is facing, the challenges he's facing in leading his government and its citizens to achieving their aspirations to join the European Union. So as SAIS is an academic institution, let me note here that Prime Minister Kovacevski holds a doctorate of economics earned at the University of Montenegro, and he is an associate professor. He's on the faculty. This is a faculty member at the School of Business and Economics Management at the American University College in Skopje. Prime Minister Kovacevski brings a business mindset to government with years of experience in the telecommunications sector. And I understand, Prime Minister, that you were CEO of the two largest telecommunications companies in the country, and also has led the challenge of integrating software for financial management. So he really brings that business mindset. He has held prominent positions with long-established firms and also startups. Really understands what it takes to generate an economy. And Prime Minister Kovacevski understands our country, the United States, having finished high school in Waterville, Minnesota, and completed executive education at Harvard. And he's taught at NYU in Skopje. And Prime Minister Kovacevski leads a country. This is my second introduction here for you. He leads a country that has repeatedly answered extraordinary demands placed on it. And I would say this, I think I can speak with confidence and say this, that no country has been asked to do more than North Macedonia to achieve its Euro-Atlantic aspirations. And no country has delivered more than his country. And under his leadership, North Macedonia is putting its experience to work in the international realm. Some of you may not know that OSCE is during this terrible time of threat and war of Russia's invasion in Ukraine, North Macedonia is the chair in office of OSCE, working at this critical time and gaining wide praise for its leadership. But I just quickly will review that what the Prime Minister's country has achieved in just the past 2 decades. In 2001, leaders signed the Ohrid Framework Agreement, and for over 2 decades have faithfully implemented this agreement, proving that well-designed agreements can work in the Balkans. Despite being blocked from NATO in 2008, after making the required reforms, North Macedonia continued to deploy troops far out of proportion to its size to the mission in Afghanistan. It's recently hosted refugees after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. After Kosovo declared independence in 2008, North Macedonia recognized the independence of its neighbor. Recently has very good relations with Kosovo. Recently hosted Kosovo's president, Vjosa Osmani, on a successful visit to the country. North Macedonia also has good relations with Serbia, and uniquely in former Yugoslavia, has no issues with any of its former Yugoslav neighbors or with Albania. In March, North Macedonia hosted Kosovo and Serbia, along with EU and US officials, in Ohrid, the beautiful town of Ohrid, the jewel, for the parties to agree on the annex of their legally binding agreement on the path to normalization. And we know from the thanks that North Macedonia received that it was more than just a host, played a role in urging these parties, 2 of its neighbors, towards agreement. Under the Prime Minister's leadership, they have ambitious vision to advance Ohrid as a center for reconciliation. And North Macedonia has walked the walk in efforts to resolve highly contentious issues with its neighbors Greece and Bulgaria, each of which had the advantage of being members of NATO and the EU. In 2018 with Greece, North Macedonia negotiated a Prespa agreement, a fair-minded, equitable arrangement now in its 5th year. This was swiftly followed by hard-won approval in the parliaments of both countries and Macedonian accession to NATO, which was done in the face of Russian efforts to thwart that. In 2017, Prime Minister Kovacevski's predecessor signed a friendship treaty with Bulgaria, including a mechanism to discuss in a civil and respectful way historical questions. Last year, under Prime Minister Kovacevski, North Macedonia accepted a difficult French-crafted EU proposal to address new demands of neighboring Bulgaria. All of this simply to open the EU negotiations that North Macedonia had already earned the right to do. And this, of course, implicates the neighbor Albania as well. Since Russia's war in Ukraine, North Macedonia has been 100% compliant with US and EU sanctions on Russia, while a neighbor of North Macedonia is hovering around 0% compliance. Since January, as I mentioned, North Macedonia has ably, to widespread praise, chaired the OSCE at what has been, without any question, the most challenging period in the organization's history. Russia's invasion of Ukraine and continued pummeling of civilians in that country pose almost existential challenges to OSCE and has required great skill of North Macedonia for its leadership. So this truly, I hope you permit me here to understand why I shared this background for you. This is truly a remarkable record, and a remarkable record requires, of course, determined political leadership, and that's what we have here in Prime Minister Kovacevski. So please, Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Edward, for the warm welcome. You know, when I was listening to the introduction, I can say it was a tough year, 2022, and the beginning of 2023. I would like to thank Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies to invite me. It is really a great honor and privilege for me to be at this highly respected educational institution and to speak on several important topics. North Macedonia is a quite unique example about how, through diplomacy and through open dialogue, one can resolve open issues. These open issues are, I am naming them identity issues. So if you see all the conflicts which happened in the countries of former Yugoslavia, also when you see the conflict, actually not the conflict, but the brutal aggression of Russia on Ukraine, it's again an identity aggression. And North Macedonia has proven that there is a model of diplomacy with which these identity issues can be addressed and they can be solved. This is the first topic I will discuss about. The second one is how decisive decisions in terms of choosing partnerships with the right allies always brings a better future for the country and the citizens. And here I mean on the partnership with the United States before all, and the European Union and the other NATO allies. And the third one is the very actual moment of the energy security and of the energy independence for my country, North Macedonia and for the Western Balkans, including Eastern Europe, in light of the war in Ukraine. So in 6 brief years, from a captured state, because for 11 years, before these 6 years, we had a government which was populist and which didn't make any decision for the country going forward, but everything was directed towards talking about the past. You know, for politicians, it's always easiest to talk about the past, because when you talk about the past, then you don't promise anything. You just play on the emotional feelings of the voters and of the citizens. So I have never liked politicians which talk about the past. But we started working and talking about the future. And that is why within 6 years, from a captured state, we are now a country which is member of NATO. And now we see the value of being member of NATO after the war in Ukraine. Then we started negotiations with the European Union. We are chairing OSCE. This is the largest security organization in Europe. And this is the last organization where still there is a dialogue with Russia. And North Macedonia is chairing it in 2022. And we are the first country that opened strategic dialogue with the United States. So all of this happened within the past year and within the 5 years before that. So how was it possible? It was possible only through making brave, tough, and leadership decisions. We resolved the dispute with the Republic of Greece. This was not an easy decision to make, because in order to become member of NATO, we had to change the name of the country. And this is the ultimate hard and tough decision someone has ever made in history. Here I see academics from the Johns Hopkins University, I see student fellows. So I don't think that there are more than 3 or 4 cases which have been making this kind of decisions. Second, as Edward mentioned, we made also a very tough 2 turnuses of negotiations with neighboring Bulgaria. First one to make the good neighborliness relations agreement, and second one to agree on the negotiation framework with the 27 member countries of the European Union. And that also included a lot of very important things to be addressed inside of these agreements. These negotiations, which I was leading last year, they were very hard because we had a very clear goal to achieve. First, and we achieved it, that the Macedonian language will become official language of the European Union without any footnotes, explanations, or asterisks where there will be additional explanations. So we achieved this. And the second, that the identity of the Macedonian people, including its culture and all the elements of our heritage, will become a part of the mosaic of the European Union's nations. So these are the 2 important issues which we achieved, including the start of the negotiations with the screening process. On the other side, we will need to include the part of the Bulgarian people together with the part of Croatian and Montenegrin and Jewish communities which live in the country in the preamble of our constitution, as we already have parts of other nations like the parts of Albanian, Roma, Bosniak, Serb, Vlah already included in our constitution. And then before that, going back to 2001, we also made the Ohrid Framework Agreement, which also Ohrid Framework Agreement gave the internal stability to the country. So now the minority rights in North Macedonia are, I would say, regulated on the highest level compared to any country within Europe and even furthermore. Why is this important? Because it gives the internal stability of the country. The other agreements give the foreign stability and cooperation of the country. And because of these pillar agreements of the country, we became member of NATO, we started accession talks with the European Union, we are chairing OSCE, and from a country which was a consumer of foreign negotiation, mediation in other countries. Let's say I was negotiating with Bulgaria in Rome, in Munich, in Brussels, and I don't know, my cabinet knows probably all the other cities. Now, Ohrid, North Macedonia, was the place where Serbia and Kosovo did their negotiations on the annex of the plan for implementation of their agreements. So, from a country using negotiation, mediation, we became a negotiation mediator together normally with the US and with the European Union. So this is a remarkable success and step forward for the country. And that's why I'm saying that all of these previous mentioned agreements, tough decisions, are the cornerstones of our stability and future. Because the future of the citizens is priceless. You know, when we became a member of NATO and started accession negotiations with the European Union, this happened practically in the toughest period for the world. First was the corona pandemics, and second, the war in Ukraine. But when I see the numbers last year, in the worst year after the Second World War, we have the highest level of foreign direct investments in the country, 752 million euros. So this is double the size which we had at the best times in the country. And this is also due to the stability of the country. Yeah, last year as well, in the most most challenging year in any sense, we had the highest state budget investments in the country, 465 million euros. And this is also because of this stability which we managed to achieve. These new foreign direct investments, and when I'm talking about foreign direct investments, these are blue chip companies coming from the United States, Canada, Germany, mainly in the automotive industry. New 3,000 job places were opened only in 1 year. The level of salaries has grown. The level of minimum wage has grown 100% compared to 5 years ago. And the level of pensions for the retired people, we increased for 40 to 50% depending on the level, again compared with the 5 years previous. So these are all figures which show that hard and right political decisions work also for the economy. Just 2 weeks ago, we signed a contract with one of the biggest producers of computer, airline industry, medical industry, and automotive industry production of chips, 205 million euros or dollars of investment in North Macedonia. So who could have imagined that in North Macedonia, only 1 year ago, who could have imagined that chips will be produced as they are produced today in Taiwan, which holds more than 60-70% of the production. And this was not going to be possible without having the stability in the country. So, factory, greenfield investment with 4,000 employees. So it means that one day, after they start the production, when you will turn on your car, electric car most probably, or your laptop, then there will be a chip produced in North Macedonia. Nobody was able to imagine that this kind of thing was going to happen. Infrastructure-wise, because these political decisions go together also with the physical connection of the country. When we see the landscape of the infrastructure of the country, being part of Yugoslavia, we had only Corridor 10. Corridor 10 is the north to the south, or south to the north. So, a highway, Belgrade, Skopje, Thessaloniki, Athens. This was the only highway which we had, and the only railway which was from the time of Yugoslavia. So you can use it usually only for heavyweight transport of raw materials. Today, we are starting building a Corridor 8. Corridor 8 is east-west, which was never built because of political reasons. Yugoslavia was not part of the Warsaw Agreement, and Albania was pretty much isolated during the communist time by itself. So that's why there was no infrastructure built to the east or to the west. So now we, by law in the parliament, we will be building a new highway to the border with Albania, and it will be built by the American-Turkish consortium Bechtel and Enka, which will connect the country to the west. And also, we are already building an express road towards Bulgaria and a highway towards, and a railway towards Bulgaria. We started already. It's more than €500 million investment in order to have communication on the Corridor 8. And why is this important? So far, we were dependent only on the Thessaloniki port. With the Corridor 8, the country will go and will be able to reach the port of Durrës in Albania and the port of Burgas in Bulgaria. So I put it a sentence like this, and I saw that many people liked it. If you are in a center of a space, as North Macedonia is in a center of the Balkans, if you do not have infrastructure, then you are a roundabout. But if you have infrastructure, then you are on a crossroad. So practically with this Corridor 8, we will become a real transport crossroad and corridor on the Balkans, not only on the Western Balkans. We also made an agreement because of the great relations and non-open questions with the neighbors. We already made an agreement with Albania that as they are building the new big port of Porto Romano, we will have a dry port in one of the cities near the border with Albania. So this means that the freights which are coming by sea, the bills of lading, will not be payable at the port in Durrës or Porto Romano, but they will be payable in North Macedonia. So the ones which are working in finance know how beneficial this is in terms of liquidity for the companies which deal through North Macedonia. And it will have effect on the companies in the country, but also it will have effect on the increased trade for the country with third-party countries which are mainly in Central and South-Eastern Europe. Because then they can trade their international transport through our dry port and through the port of Durrës. The relations with the United States. So, since the first day of the independence of North Macedonia, the United States has been the strategic partner most important for the country. Yesterday I had a meeting with the Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken. It was a very successful meeting on which was reaffirmed the strong support of the United States for the Euro integration of North Macedonia. And this is for us very important because having this kind of a clear message, it sends message to all our partners in the European Union, but also it sends message to all the political parties in the countries which for different reasons are not supporting the European Union's path of North Macedonia. And there is no alternative. Because if we see all the numbers of the economic growth of the countries which are not part of the European Union and were previously part of the socialist or communist systems, they grow 2 to 2.5% year over year. The countries which joined the European Union, as did the Czech Republic, Slovak, Croatia, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, they grow with double the growth rate than previously. So there is a clear benefit for the citizens to be part of the common market. Because it's one thing if you work on your country's market, which are small markets, ours is 1.8 million people, compared to a common market of the European Union of half a billion people, which is even bigger market than the US market, which is 330 million. And that is why I'm saying there is no alternative for the country of becoming a member in the European Union. And nobody has ever proposed a different alternative, except for some political parties which are financed by Russia in the country. When we talk about energy, then there was a paradox which happened in Europe. And this paradox was done and made because of the wrong decision of Russia to attack Ukraine. There was an infrastructure in which millions, if not billions of euros were invested in order to build Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, Druzhba and other pipelines which were supplying energens from the east to the west. So now this infrastructure is useless. So this is paradox number one. Now we have to build in Europe a new infrastructure which will supply gas, oil from south to the north, from north to the south, and from west to the east. We are part of the corridor south to the north. And that is why we already started the procedures, and by the end of the year there will be a new pipeline starting to be built between Greece and North Macedonia. Will be connected to TANAP and TAP pipelines, and will be connected to the new LNG terminals which are built in Greece. So this will be the LNG terminal in Alexandropoli. There is already one existing in Revituza, and there will be two more which will be built in Volos and in Piraea. Also, Albania is in discussions to build a terminal in one of their ports, probably Durrës or Valona. This is still decision to come. And with this, besides having the only one interconnector which we had so far for the Gazprom gas from Russia, now we will have a new interconnector to which will be connected as well Serbia, Kosovo, and other countries. This leads us to the possibility to build new energy facilities, because the energy production in this region is mainly made out of lignite, of coal. And this is obsolete facilities from the time of 1980s, 1985s, and so on. So this gives us a possibility to discuss with General Electric and with other partners, countries, companies, to build base load energy with gas, with facilities based on gas for production of electricity for the country, and regional projects of bigger sizes for the countries which are in the neighborhood. Because also the landscape of the neighborhood has been changed in the past 2 decades. You know, out of the countries on the Balkans, now we have Slovenia, Croatia, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Albania, which are parts, Bulgaria, which are parts of NATO. Slovenia, Croatia, Bulgaria have become members of the European Union. Montenegro, Albania, North Macedonia are negotiating with the European Union, and Serbia is negotiating with the European Union. Greece has been a member of NATO and the European Union. The landscape has changed to a better. The regional cooperation is very important on the Balkans, and that is why, besides the European integration, we also have regional initiatives which are building on the same basis as the European Union. And this is the free movement of goods, people, capital, and services. So the Berlin process is important as it includes all the countries for the Western Balkans. And we are very proud that the agreements which have been signed, and these agreements are in terms of recognition mutual between the countries for the university diplomas and for other non-tariff issues. The country deponent of these agreements is North Macedonia. This once again proves that the big and tough decisions which you make pays off at the end of the day, as you become a factor of stability, as we have become a factor of stability for the region. And also there is the Open Balkans initiative. This is an initiative which is organic. It's again based on the 4 freedoms of Europe. And it is an original idea between Serbia, Albania, and North Macedonia. Who could have imagined only some years ago that there will be an Open Balkans initiative which includes Albania and Serbia? And what are the results? We have signed numerous number of agreements in terms of removing non-tariff barriers, including green lace on the borders, because, you know, when I come to the United States, for you, it's unimaginable borders between the states. Also in Europe, there are no more borders. The only borders which remained are on the Balkans, a region where there were no borders in the past. And 70% of the transport time is waiting on borders. So that's why we started removal of the non-tariff barriers. And what is the result? The export of North Macedonia to Serbia has increased 50% in the last 2 years, towards Albania 40%. Also their exports have increased towards our country. The overall trade has increased for 25%. The number of tourists which we had 2021 versus 2020 from Serbia has increased for 100%. And the number of tourists from Serbia we have 2022 versus 2021 has increased for 500%. So this is a result of a good neighborly political relations, how they influence the communication, trade, tourism, and all other important aspects of the society. In terms of our NATO membership, we are the newest member of NATO, but we didn't let grass to grow over our feet. So we are very active, and as Edward says, even when we were not members of NATO, providing help to missions, now we have provided everything what was in our capacity to help the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian government in their struggle and fight for independence, territorial sovereignty, right for self-determination, and defense of their democratic society. This is what we are supporting in Ukraine. And this is how we have aligned our foreign policy with the European Union's foreign policy 100%, even that we are not members of the European Union. Why? Because when you share same values, then it is easy to align. And we do share the same values with the United States and with the European Union, as North Macedonia has always been on the right side of history when you look from time perspective. So this help has been provided in military and non-military aid, everything publicly announced with the relevant decisions of the government. OSCE is a big challenge in 2022, and we are honored to have this big responsibility to chair. In December, there will be the big meeting which will be held of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs in Skopje. And we have made our priorities for the chairmanship, Ukraine, Caucasus, and our Minister of Foreign Affairs is deeply involved into the discussions in these regions, normally together with the partner countries, mainly with the Quint ambassadors in OSCE in Vienna. So here I will conclude, then we can go to questions. The country has a very clear vision towards European Union integration. We have a very clear plan for energy diversification. Last year, we managed to install 192 megawatts of renewable energy capacities, which can supply 10 average Macedonian cities with clean, green energy. We have a clear plan for financing infrastructure in terms of energy infrastructure. So this means the pipelines, which I mentioned, the energy production facilities, as well as the high voltage interconnections with the neighboring countries. Here, before all, I mean with Greece and Albania, as we are building a huge triangle high voltage 400 kilovolt connection for energy transport. We have a clear plan which is already started with execution to build a road and highway infrastructure towards the east and the west, the Corridor 8, which has become part and was not in the past of the pan-European corridors, because only the Corridor 10 was part of the pan-European corridors, and now this corridor will be able to get support from the European Union and European Bank financing. We have clearly aligned our foreign policy with the European Union, and we have started the negotiations with the European Union, with the reports from Brussels coming to be very positive. We are successfully chairing OSCE, and what is in front of us by the end of the year is to do the decision for the constitutional amendments, for which we yesterday received strong and undoubted support from the United States Secretary of State and his team. Thank you very much for being patient to listen to me, and I am free to open your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for that not just clear, but also encouraging and positive vision that you have. We have some time here. I'm going to quickly jump in, if you'll permit me, just a comment, and then I'm going to turn real quick to your meeting with Secretary Blinken yesterday and ask you, I'll give you a preview of my question of what actually the U.S. can do to help achieve that very important goal. But first, let me just quick comment, because you mentioned Open Balkans, and I know we have here in the audience, we're honored to have representatives of embassies of various countries in the region. And just to point out, you hit the nail on the head when you said that what makes that work, the Open Balkans, what makes that work is the good neighborly relations between those three. But of course, unfortunately, one of those three countries that is in Open Balkans does not have good neighborly relations with its neighbors, and that country has the largest economy by far, as you know well. So that's, I just wanted to share that presents an inherent challenge to that very encouraging vision that you share. But let me turn and pivot to your meeting with Secretary Blinken. And you alluded to this here, and quickly for those who don't know this issue, just it's very clear. You know the posture of Russia to Ukraine. So Putin basically tells the Ukrainians, you're little Russians. You're really just, we tell you, we're bigger, we tell you what your history is, we tell you who you really are. You're just really part of the Russian nation. And we can analogize a bit to, this is a little bit the way you have it from Bulgaria that has made these strong demands, even after taking those steps together with Greece, in partnership with Greece to resolve that issue. So my question for you is, you met with Secretary of State Blinken. In addition to providing that support and to pass these constitutional amendments, and obviously the U.S. and everybody wants to see you have sustained EU negotiations, what can the U.S. do? Is there something that you look for from the U.S. to do so to make it possible so that in the fall, when you need to pass these amendments and overcome political opposition, is there anything the U.S. can do to help?
So, yeah, this is, I would say, a very important question. And as I said, there is undoubted and strong support by the U.S. for the European integration of North Macedonia, as there was by the United States for the NATO integration of North Macedonia. United States has stand with us since the very beginning, this I said. And this help has not been only declarative, but it has been hands-on. So a lot of funds in reforms in many spheres in the country, from the judicial, security, economy sectors, police, and so on, to the promoting of North Macedonia as a country which can be an example for the others in the region. And this has been proved. So the United States has always the ability, through their senior officials, to send strong messages to all the political players in the country, but as well outside, about the importance of this kind of decisions. And I believe that the United States, through their Department of State and colleagues of the Secretary of State, including himself in his statement yesterday, that we will get this undoubted, as we got support for the Euro integration. Also in parts of the reforms, because when we start, when we are joining the European Union, then a lot of reforms are made on the road. When the screening phase is finished, then there are reports of KPIs which need to be implemented in the rule of democracy, in the public administration, in numerous sectors which are divided in the clusters and chapters to fulfill the criteria for membership in the European Union. The United States Embassy in Skopje has always been hands-on present during all the three decades of our independence in order to help to manage difficult processes in the country. And I believe that this will be the case as well now in this challenge which we have in front of us, which, you know, I was always, usually prime ministers are asked whether they are optimists. So I have been always a rational optimist. And this means that I believe in achieving a goal, but I also work to achieve the goal. or as Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Borrell would say, I am not an optimist, but I am an activist to do the things.
Thank you for that. Let me, here in the time that we have remaining, pivot to a question where activism is needed. And I want to actually, the way I see this, Prime Minister, is an opportunity. This is a way for me to give you an opportunity to address a problem where your country, North Macedonia, is an example for the region in so many ways. And at the same time, you're part of a region which has endemic problems. And it's a problem that you know the United States is very much on top of. And I want to read, this is a quote from just last week from Gabriel Escobar. He's the, those who don't know, he's the special representative of the U.S. to the Western Balkans. And so this is really, I see this as an opportunity for you. And I'm going to close with a quote from one of your citizens there who enjoys this excellent press freedom that you have, where North Macedonia is among the top countries in the world for media freedom. And so I'm going to close here with a quote from one of your citizens who's exercising that right that they enjoy in your country. So this is Gabriel Escobar. Just last week, an official State Department briefing. I definitely think that one of the biggest challenges in the entire Western Balkans is the deeply entrenched corruption. And we support all efforts to impose the rule of law to make the reforms necessary to reach a higher standard of accountability. And we fully support actions to fight corruption in the entire region. So this is not to single out your country. We're not doing that. But this is an endemic problem that you can address. And that's from the U.S. So let's hear what does the EU have to say about this. This is the EU ambassador in your country. He's more specific. He says, North Macedonia is not doing enough in the fight against corruption, although there is progress. I want to repeat that. He says, although there is progress. The results are disappointing. Proactive investigations, efficiency of prosecution, fight against corruption at all levels are necessary. It is the judiciary that has a key role in this fight against corruption. Okay, so that's, you have an EU, a US perspective, and EU, and I told you, enjoying this, again, one of the freest countries in the world for press freedom. Let me give you a quote. This is from well-known journalist and observer in your country, Katarina Blaževska, and she writes, in response there, you can see her echoing this, what are we talking about then? We are overdosing on conferences where ambassadors express their dismay about our lack of commitment to fighting corruption while sitting side by side with executive branch officials who repeat the same phrases, must, should, urgently, and then do nothing. And at this next conference, again, the same thing. So how to respond to this? That's one of your citizens there. Please, Prime Minister.
Your first comment proves that if there is a will, there can be a result. From a captured state where the political party at that time, currently opposition, was actually guiding the media what to do. Today, we are the 36th country in the world based on freedom of media. Only in 1 year of my mandate, we improved 19 places. So what is the recipe? The recipe is that politics does not interfere in media. So from the first day in office, I said that I don't have phone calls with editors or with media outlets in regard to their editorial policy, nor my ministers. And it proved that if this is done, then the improvement will come. So this is the best fact which came from the Reporters Without Borders. When we talk about rule of law, corruption, fight against corruption, this is a problem of all the countries which went through transition. Because including us and all the countries in the surrounding, they went to a transition from one system to another system. From privatization, from actually national economies into privatization of the economies. And this created the so-called tycoons, oligarchs in all the countries. So it's a very complex issue. But as with the first case, we said that we will not influence any judge or prosecutor or president of any judicial system body. And we stick to this. So if we see all the reports, because you mentioned there is an improvement, on all the reports, we have improvement in the rule of law, fight against corruption in numbers. So let's say 40% has been increased the finding of criminal cases. More than 400 persons are identified in the high-level organized crime by the police, and they are processed to the judicial system. By constitution, in our case, the judicial system, including the courts and prosecution, are independent. So we have executive governance, which is independent, legislative, the parliament, independent, the judicial, independent, and then we have the municipal, which is again independent. And you are familiar, Mr. Joseph, with all of this, as you have been very present in our country. The government does reforms in terms of laws, financing, but financing to put budgets towards the judicial system, and they manage it alone, and capital expenditures. So we have invested a lot in digitalization of the judicial system, in improving the conditions for work, so higher salaries, because usually higher salaries mean lower level of corruption, appropriate number of employments. We have the first digital courthouse in the country, which was made with the support of the United States, and we are building a digital IT system for interoperability of the courthouses with the institutions with whom they exchange the most of the cases. What needs to be done more? Improve the transparency. Because when the transparency will be improved, then we can very easily, or the judicial system can very easily identify who is performing at the expected level and who is underperforming. Because in every system, there is always an individual responsibility. The judicial system and the prosecution system is comprising of individuals. So we cannot say all is good or all is bad. That's why transparency is needed. You know, as you mentioned, I was studying in the United States, and I remember there was a daily newspaper, LeSueur County newspaper, in which, at that time, in 1992, so 31 years ago, all the court decisions were published in a newspaper, which judge what kind of court decision made. So this we need to implement. Also to improve and to increase the level of the parliament involvement into the, let's say, organizing public hearing of the presidents of the judicial councils and the judicial bodies which they appoint. This also increases transparency, it increases accountability. We have prepared numerous laws to improve the legislation together with the European Union, as the law for Academy of Judges and Prosecutors. So every judge and prosecutor to come through the professional career path from the beginning, to start in the with appropriate education and with appropriate practice skills training. So these are all improvements on which we work. And I believe that there will be an improvement, as there was with the media.
Very well, thank you. And if I can, what I want to do, again, not in any way to single out your country and your government, I want to pivot here and turn to our own government and to see how the Biden administration is living up here to this call for accountability and this focus. And this I want to ask you because it's not any small detail, but you mentioned this very important strategic road project. This is part of the whole EU corridor system, this corridor 8 and 10, as they're known. And as you said, this is absolutely strategic to make your country a crossroads, and I think everyone would support the concept and how important it should have been done years ago. Now, you mentioned that there's an American company that's actually the lead in carrying this out, Bechtel. And of course, part of the role of a U.S. embassy is to promote American business. That's what they do in all countries. And at the same time, as Deputy Assistant Secretary Escobar pointed out, we also want to promote accountability and transparency. So, and you just emphasized the importance of that. So with respect to that contract, where it has raised many questions by journalists using those same press freedoms that, to your credit, you're encouraging. They're holding as citizens the government accountable. How can you approach that question of the Bechtel contract and the need for transparency? I know there's several laws that are being fast-tracked, and questions have been raised. So I hope you would agree those are fair questions for citizens to raise. How do you respond to those questions?
This is the biggest infrastructure project in the history of the country, not independent North Macedonia, including the time of Socialist Republic of Macedonia, the biggest infrastructure project. This is building of a highway, 110 kilometers, 6-lane highway on the Corridor 8. I will give you a comparison. Annually, in the past 30 years, we were building, as a country, 2.5 kilometers per year of highways. Now, there will be 25 kilometers of highway per year in the next 5 years, built. In order this to happen, the parliament brought a law based on which law was chosen Bechtel and their consortium partner Enka from Turkey to build the highway. This contract has been, the contract with the company has been made in accordance with the law, which law has been checked and approved by the Constitutional Court of the country. And now, in the contract itself, as in any other commercial contract, there are parts and stipulations which have confidentiality clauses. The formulas, how the consortium is forming their prices, because they do not want these formulas to be in the hands of their competitors. Number two, the technology, how they work. And this is normal in any contract which involves a company which is coming from the corporate sector. All the other parts of the contract has been available for briefings with the media, with the chambers of commerce, and with the political parties. The problem in North Macedonia is that our opposition is against every strategic decision of the country. So they were against membership in NATO. They were against the start of the negotiations with the European Union. When we signed the Frontex agreement with the European Union, this was the first agreement with the European Union in which the Macedonian language was on the same contract with all the languages of the European Union, and the agreement was approved by all 27 countries, including Greece and Bulgaria. They didn't vote for this also. And now the same actors are against the building of the Corridor 8 by Bechtel and Enka. This contract which has been agreed has been done according to the Macedonian legislation. But there is a possibility that if we improve parts of the legislation in accordance with the Constitution, that the project can be built faster and cheaper. And this will be valid for all the infrastructure projects which are passed with the law in the parliament. So there is nothing which is hidden or not explained to the public, to the media, to the political parties, to the chambers of commerce. One additional value of this project is first, as I said, we will have a modern infrastructure on the Corridor 8. This has positive influence on the regional development. Because if we see North Macedonia now, the most developed regions and cities in the country are the ones which are on Corridor 10. The least developed part of the countries are the ones which are on Corridor 8, which has never been built. So the south, west of the country, and the northeast of the country are the least developed. Why? Because there is no proper infrastructure for the last century. And they used to be the most developed previously. Why? Because Via Ignatia was going in that part. Via Ignatia was going east to the west. You are literate with world history. And after that, there was no road. So this is benefit number 2, besides having the infrastructure, fast roads, secure roads. Benefit number 3 is that the economy grows with new highways and railways, tourism, services businesses, and other businesses. And as I mentioned, the dry port in Struga. Number 4, which is also very important, the size of this project, which will be done in the next 5 years, adds 2% GDP growth year over year. In the contract is stipulated that 51% of the resources implemented in the project has to be from North Macedonia. 8,000 employees will be working on this project. Subcontractors, majority will be from North Macedonia. Employees, engineers, and all types of workers, logistics workers from North Macedonia. Multi-faced positive implications on the economy. And that's why I'm saying that this is the biggest project in the history of our country.
Thank you. And I think, again, everyone would, the economic benefits are manifold. Absolutely. It could be transformative, especially in the way that you describe. And then, but before turning it to any questions as we have time for, let me just come to, again, the very impressive role that you and your country are carrying out, actually, for all of us, for the U.S., all of its NATO allies and EU partners, as chair of OSCE at this time of the unprecedented division within OSCE with the Russian invasion. And I want to ask you, it's very intriguing. You have a vision now of actually making Ohrid like a center for a reconciliation, and you're, as I mentioned, North Macedonia is now earning an international reputation here through the leadership at OSCE as a respected and trusted leader at extremely difficult times, and you contributed to the agreement, as difficult as it is, between Serbia and Kosovo. So what can you tell us about the vision? Do you have a plan to try to cultivate this? And Ohrid, those of you who haven't been there, it's absolutely a jewel. One of the most spectacularly beautiful sites on the lake Ohrid there. Please.
We have, I stated it at the beginning that we have a unique model of diplomacy which works, and with which, with the power of diplomacy, we were able to solve the biggest problems, the identity issues, and to make agreements which work for the future of the country. The first one of them was the Ohrid Framework Agreement, which has also been noted by the United Nations Secretary General Guterres, Mr. Guterres, as one of the best examples of agreements to solve minority issues in one country. And it works. That is why not only the chairmanship in OPSE, but the ability to become chairman of OPSE was because of these agreements which work in the country. So, being in discussion with my Minister of Foreign Affairs, we came to a conclusion that when we see the problems which are facing, let's say, Armenia, Azerbaijan now as chairmanship of OSCE, another country, we are explaining to them the model which we used. And it always intrigues them. So that is why most probably we will be making a Center for Reconciliation type of an institute in Ohrid. Also in Ohrid we have the Prespa Forum Dialogue, which is under the auspices of the government organized, on which numerous foreign ministers, state leaders are coming, and there we are discussing security issues which are practically solved on the way which we used and utilized in North Macedonia. And this is the reason why in Ohrid, Serbia and Kosovo negotiated, but I can freely say were able to reach a bigger leap in their agreement, or in their advance to reaching agreement and implementation, then they were able to do that in Brussels. And that's why I'm saying that this is something which can be used in many different situations, should be studied by scholars. I would even encourage you, here with me is our ambassador Zoran Popov, who is ambassador to Washington, and he is experienced diplomat. Young but very experienced diplomat. He has been part of the most of these processes in the country. You can use his knowledge, utilize it. Also with me is my former economy advisor, Nina Fiti. She is a PhD in economics, and now she is advisor to the World Bank director, and she is actually working and living in Washington. So anytime you want to have more deep insights, when you are writing your papers or when you are doing some research on Macedonian politics or Macedonian economy, you can use their experience and knowledge, and anytime they are here with me, so you can even exchange contacts.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And I see we're actually, we've gone over time here, and I apologize for not being able to take questions. And I just want to close here by emphasizing for everyone here what you just said. I want you to know something that passed just without any notice from the Prime Minister, that he spoke about his foreign minister, and Bujar Osmani, who's very involved, of course, with the OSCE. But you notice that he mentioned this without any reference of anything unusual, that it's completely natural. And I just want to point out, for those of you who don't know the region, that Bujar Osmani is ethnic Albanian. Well, Prime Minister Kovacevski is ethnic Macedonian. And I've seen the interaction. There's no reference point here, and those of you who've worked in the Balkans know just next door in Kosovo, this type of natural interaction is still something that across the board, there's some in Kosovo. I don't want to say that there's none, but they're at such bitter loggerheads. But you see in North Macedonia that it's not even a thought anymore about this interaction and who is actually representing the country in international fora, and it's taken as completely natural and a product, again, of the years of hard work and leadership. And Prime Minister Kovacevski, I want to thank you for your leadership and thank you for coming to SAIS. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your invitation. Thank you very much for being a great audience. Thank you very much for being a host. Thanks to the Dean for inviting me to Johns Hopkins University, one of the most renewed universities in the world. For me, it was a pleasure, an honor, and unforgettable experience which I had here in Washington. Thanks to you.